I would welcome everyone here tonight. I'm Paul Briggs. I'm the town attorney. I'd like to give you a little background before we hear from the presenters and from the public and our town residents. This project began nearly 2 years ago as an idea by Dr. Michael Lozman, who shortly thereafter formed the Capital District Jewish Holocaust Memorial Board with Mr. Buzz Rosenthal. Dr. Lozman came to the town of Niskuna seeking a special use permit to locate the memorial on land to be donated by the Albany Catholic Diocese and Bishop Sharpenberger on the eastern end of the Most Holy Redeemer Cemetery property. The Niskuna Town Code allows a religious educational facility to be located in an R1 zone, that is a low-density residential zone, if the town board grants a special use permit. I want to repeat that again because that's important because of some information that I've read that is not correct. This residential zone allows a religious educational facility. There is no use variance required under the town code, nor does this application require any relief from the zoning code. Again, it is a permitted use, and the only requirement is that the town planning board first review the project and make a recommendation to the town board as to whether a special use permit is required. The reason for a special use permit is that requires the planning board and in turn the town board to give the project an extra level of scrutiny. The town is not looking to make this a commercial zone. That would require a change in zoning. That is not what is being sought here. This is a permitted use. Dr. Lozman applied to the town board for that special use permit in accordance with the procedures set forth in the town code. If the town board grants a special use permit or grants a special use permit with conditions, the applicant will have to return to the planning board for final site plan approval. I would like to introduce the peoples that are here tonight representing the applicants. There's Dr. Michael Lozman, Mr. Neil Golub, Rabbi Matthew Cutler, and Dan Demling of Demling and Demling, the architectural firm who developed the new design. I would also note that Father Jim Kane from the Catholic Diocese is in the room and is available to answer any questions should any person have a question with respect to the diocese grant or donation of the land to the foundation. The planning board reviewed the preliminary site plan and special use permit during the end of 2017 and early 2018. The planning board held a public hearing and made a detailed recommendation to the town board, recommending unanimously that the town board grant a special use permit with conditions. About a year ago, the town board held a public hearing on the proposal. After hearing from residents and members of the Jewish community, the Capital District Jewish Holocaust Memorial Board asked for a postponement of the town's board's vote on the special use permit to be able to work with others in the community to refine and redesign the proposed memorial. At that time, Councilman Denise McGraw facilitated a meeting with Town Supervisor Syed, the Memorial Board, and the Jewish Federation to review and consider comments made during the hearing. There were also deadlines set to report back to the community. In addition, all town board members were in regular communication with interested and concerned citizens. Both the town board members and the planning board are here tonight. Following that process, Neil Golub then led a visioning process to reimagine a memorial and enlist the assistance of designers Michael Blau of Adirondack Studios, and architect Dan Dembling. Over the last several months, Dr. Lozman and Memorial Board Chairman Buzz Rosenthal have been working with Mr. Golub, Rabbi Cutler, the Jewish Federation of Northeastern New York's Rob Kovich, and others from the Niskayuna and Capital Region community on that redesign. Hopefully, many of you have had an opportunity to see the design posted on the town's website. I'm going to first ask our town planner to provide some information concerning questions that we've had presented to the town in the past few weeks concerning the logistics or details of the proposal.
Hi, everybody. I am Laura Robertson, the town planner. I will try to be writing down your questions as you ask them in case we need anything immediately at the meeting. But I have received some comments from people by email, and a lot of them, just as a reminder, there's a little bit of a difference between a special use permit and site plan. And the special use permit is a higher level look at the project, and site plan really gets down into the details. So a lot of the logistical details of this proposal would still be worked out at the planning board level, but just generally speaking, I know there was a question about operating hours, the status of that now, which can still be worked out at planning board, but the status right now is that the memorial would be open dawn to dusk, 7 days a week, seasonally, like Easter weekend to New Year's, weather permitting. I know there's a question about a gate. Currently on the planning board site plan, there's no anticipated gate. That's a detail that could be worked out at site plan. The provisions for security and maintenance, the planning board did have a pretty thorough conversation with the applicant about that. They have met with the police department, I think twice, but they've also agreed to provide security cameras that are mounted in strategic locations around the site. It can be monitored on DVR that's activated by motion, and potentially, as a site plan detail, install motion-sensitive flood lighting. There's also concern about overflow parking, and the provisions for that, which were discussed at the planning board, would be that on the high-level events where there's a lot of people parking, that they would be using the cemetery. It's a quarter of a mile west of the memorial. And then I know that we hear the question about the bathrooms fairly regularly. The planning board and the applicant agreed to provide temporary porta-john type restaurants, but you can actually make them pretty nice on site, but have an area banked on the site plan so that in the future, if permanent bathrooms ever needed to be located, they would already be incorporated in the site plan. But since the visits are expected to be about less than 2 hours, it may just always work out to have temporary facilities. So those were a couple of logistical questions. Again, I know that there are more logistical questions out there. A lot of those are site plan questions. All welcome to ask them, still take them. We'll receive all of them, but hopefully that answers some questions.
At this time, I request that Rabbi Dr. Lozman speak first.
Michael, you can take that microphone if you want. Yeah, thank you, Rabbi.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm really delighted to be here. We've been here many times before, and it's really very exciting because what we're doing is very exciting. For those of you that may not remember, I have spent almost 2 decades taking college students to Eastern Europe to restore Jewish cemeteries that were destroyed during the Nazi era. And that work has been extremely, extremely rewarding. The awareness that here we are in the Capital District without an appropriate Holocaust memorial was striking, and I thought that it was time that we did have such a memorial. The value for a memorial is apparent. I don't really need to get into too many details. We've discussed that so many times, but all you need to do is read the newspapers, watch the television. Here is a magazine article dated November of last year that speaks again about the making of an American Nazi. So the need is obvious, and anything that speaks against hatred, bigotry, prejudice is the right thing. There is no wrong thing about it. And I hope that ultimately you all will support it for that purpose alone. I ended my talk last week, for those of you that were there, with a comment made by a rabbi, Rabbi Schneerson, who died several decades ago. And I want to start my discussion by repeating the same thing that I ended with last time. And this is what he said. If you see what needs to be repaired and how to repair it, then you have found a piece of the world that God has left for you to complete. If you see what needs to be repaired and how to repair it, then you have found a piece of the world that God has left for you to complete. I truly believe, as I said last time, that we are doing God's work. And the restoration projects that we've done, the building of a memorial to speak against, to undo what the Nazis did, this all falls into line with repairing the world, and this is why it was so important. With that idea in mind, I approached our new Bishop Scharfenberger, and I discussed it with him, and I said, wouldn't this be a great interreligious program if we did it jointly? And he thought it was great. For those of you that haven't met him, I urge you to meet him. He's an amazing person. He's a very spiritual person, and we've developed a great friendship. I've met with him maybe 6 or a dozen times, and each time it's been an inspiration. And because of his benevolence and because of his willingness to reach out to us, he offered the property here that we have here in Niskayuna. That is why we are here in Niskayuna. He offered that property, and that was a wonderful thing that he did. The interesting thing beyond that is that history is being made. Here you have the Catholic Church and the Jewish community joining forces together to establish a Holocaust memorial. This is history in the making. For that alone, it deserves great commendation and should find the light of the day. So I'm very, very impressed with that element, and I hope you are as well. I do want to share just quickly 3 very short stories that I've encountered to explain that sometimes these things are even more, have peripheral advantages, things that we don't even stop to think about. We've talked about the value of a Holocaust memorial because it speaks against hatred and so on. But let me give you an example of what happened to me over the years in Eastern Europe. We were in a village called Svencianelli. And as always, after we restore the Jewish cemetery, we invite the entire village to come along for a dedication service. And we'd had our dedication, and this woman comes up to me afterwards, and she speaks English, and she has tears in her eyes. And she comes up to me, she whispers, and you may or may not know that in Lithuania, 95% of the Jews were killed, 95%. And you may or may not know that, unfortunately, the Nazis came in, they gave their instructions, they left, and the Nazis were quite complicit. The Lithuanians were quite complicit in ordinary people being convinced that Jews had no value to go on with the murdering and killing. So this woman comes up to me afterwards, with tears in her eyes, and she whispers in her ear, she speaks English, and she says, I want you to know, I want you to know that when I go to church, I pray for forgiveness for what we did to the Jews. And she's crying and crying, and I put my arms around her, and I said, let us hope for a better future for tomorrow. The reason I'm telling you this is because the restoration project was more than just putting a fence around and preserving Jewish heritage and undoing things. It gave her the opportunity to relate to it and to release this guilt, these emotions that she had. The second time this happened was in a different village in Lithuania, and it was on a Saturday, and everything was closed, and we were walking by the school. It was a lovely village, and we definitely wanted to do some work there. And this man comes down from the school, walking down the steps, and he wanted to know what we were doing. A very nice gentleman. We told him what we were there for. We're there in the village to evaluate the village. We wanted to do a restoration project. And he's an artist. They said that they were having an art show at that evening. Would we stay? We couldn't. We said we can't do that. In any case, he took us into the school, and he showed us his artwork. And he was very proud of what he was, a wood carver. It was magnificent. When we got finished with that, he herded us into, one of us means me and my translator, into a small room, which was a music room, which was a lot of instruments. And I thought that was nice. We were being very polite. That's really lovely. But he closed the door, and through the interpreter, he said, I want to tell you something. And what he told me was that his parents were taken to the concentration camps, and they gave him over to a Christian family to raise. And he said, they told him, never tell anybody that you are a Jew. And he said, I have never, this is a man well into his 70s and maybe older. And he came up to me in this little room. That's why he wanted us in a little room. And he said, I want you to know that my father was Jewish. And with that, I said, I feel honored that you told me that. He burst into tears and kissed me in my face uncontrollably. And it gave him, it wasn't the idea of putting a fence up. It was the idea that somehow I represented to him an opportunity to confront this thing inside him and say for the first time, because he feared for his life if he told anybody that he was a Jew, for the first time that he was Jewish, it opened a different door for him. And it made me feel that what we're doing was of such value. It wasn't just a fence. It wasn't just a restoration of Jewish heritage. It was giving people an opportunity. Now, last week, at the last meeting, it was a very interesting experience for those of you that were there. We had a gentleman come up, and he spoke at some length, but he didn't really talk about the Holocaust as much. He said his parents were concentration survivors, but what he did talk about was how his childhood was ruined. And can you imagine how much courage it took to face a room full of strangers and talk about how his childhood was ruined by the virtue of the fact that his parents, when they escaped the concentration camp, that lived growing up in that kind of atmosphere. Again, it was the construction of this memorial that allowed him to do that. And this is what I'm hoping we will see elsewhere. When children come to visit the memorial, I'm hoping that they will also get another sense of the value of it. And if one of them, just one child, looks at that memorial and says, when I grow up, I'm going to do something about it to make sure this never happens again. If only one child does it, then the whole thing is of value. What about if 100 children do it? Maybe 1,000 children do it. You can see how this can change the world. The memorial has such a value that we really can't look at it in a very narrow frame of reference. It has an extended value. The memorial will be there long after all of us are gone. Now, I'm aware that there are a number of people that have concerns. And I do want to tell you that we have, as a group, tried to address those concerns and will continue to address those concerns. You have a professional planning board and state board. You have an attorney, police chief, town supervisor. These are professional people. They are there for you. And we have worked with them over and over and several times. And what they think we should do is what we are going to do. So I understand your concerns, and I know that there will be issues that come up about traffic and safety and corridor and all the other things that have come up in the past. But rest assured that you have an excellent group behind you and something that you can really be very, very proud of. So I do want to tell you that I am planning to be here. I hope the long-term, the legacy of Niskayuna will be one that we did have a Holocaust memorial built here, that we are a very caring community. We care about teaching for the future, that this hatred has no place. This is what I'm hoping for. And I'm very, very glad that you are all here, that you'll have an opportunity to express your views, but we'll be here to answer those questions for you. Thank you very much.
I'm Rabbi Matt Cutler. I've been in this community for 24 years. And like many of you out here whose faces I recognize, we are proud to call this our town, our home. This is my community. And in the course of 24 years, I've seen a lot of changes. Some of them are good and some of them not so good. And in the course of the 24 years so far, I will tell you that one of the most scary changes have come in the growth of anti-Semitism in the last few years. Yes, we've heard about the atrocities that happened in Pittsburgh. Yes, we've heard the atrocities that have happened in San Diego. And then last week of synagogues being torched in Chicago and Chabad houses in the Boston area. But I want to talk to you about our community. I want to talk to you about the anti-Semitism that exists in our town. I've been called to the school to address these issues. I had to explain to a kindergarten child why it wasn't okay for another 5-year-old girl to say to her, my mommy won't let me play with you because you don't believe in Jesus. I had to explain to middle school children why it's okay to be proud of who you are, but it's not okay to greet each other with Nazi salutes as a source of your white pride. I had to go to a community adjacent to this one and explain to a school district why a child won't ride the bus because they play a game called Kick the Jew on the bus. Now that's our community. This is existing in our towns. Now the Holocaust is an event that happened in Europe, but it could easily be manifest in different places in our communities around the world. The Holocaust didn't happen overnight. What the brilliance of this design is all about is how it had matured and festered and picked up on grains of hatred that turned into policy, that turned into law, that turned into dehumanization, that turned into genocide. It was a process that was left unchecked. Now, the brilliance of this design is that a pair of architects with their associates were able to hear the concerns of many and be able to address it as best as possible. This plan that you have seen pictures of and you'll hear about needs to happen in our town, in my town, because the level of hatred that exists cannot go unanswered. We have done educational programs. Thank you to the Golub family and Jane of blessed memory and Neil for helping encourage a world of difference, no place for hate, anti-bullying campaigns. But yet we have children that will throw pennies at Jewish children and say, pick it up. Oh, that one happened to my child. That one was really painful. It was beautifully addressed by our schools, but it happened in my town. So I am proud of where we are right now with this design. And it's my honor now to invite one of the major catalysts in the transformation of the plan in the last year and a half to come forward and talk about the process and the need that is matured in through this town, through this process. Neil, this group that worked with it has brought an incredible project forward, and thank you for your effort in making it happen.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be with you tonight. For those of you who don't know, my family moved here in 1941, and as a kid, I had to fight my way around the block because I was Jewish. So I learned how at a very young age to deal with anti-Semitism. But we're here today for a very specific reason. I was here last spring when the meetings were held. I listened to what was being said. I saw the designs. I can tell you factually that the people that were here were aggressively supportive of having a memorial, but the pushback from the community on the design was really strenuous. And I observed this over 2 meetings, and I came to the conclusion, if we let this play out the way it is, we're going to have a problem because we'll never be able to resolve this entire issue. Now, the Memorial Committee and Dr. Lozman and his group, they've worked very hard, and they are a piece of the Jewish community. But the spokes organization for the Jewish community is the Jewish Federation, led by Rob Kovach, right over here, our executive director. And so the community should speak about what was going on. And unfortunately, at the time, maybe things happened a little prematurely because that information didn't get through the community as well as it should have. And plans weren't made as well as they should have been made at the beginning. I saw this and I talked to the chairman of the board, and I said, look, I've got a suggestion. Here's my suggestion. We need to put this thing on the side table. I will offer to facilitate a discussion between Dr. Lozman's group and the Jewish community. I will put together a group of very intelligent people who can look at the facts, consider the details, and bring forth hopefully a discussion so that the two groups can work together and resolve the issues and take some of the negatives off the table. Well, the town board was very appreciative of that, and I give them a lot of credit because I think there would have been a heck of a debate that would have not gone very well. And so it's about a year now we started, and when I thought about it, I said to myself, oh gracious, Neil, what'd you get yourself into? I had no idea where we were going to go. I knew that we all wanted to do a memorial, but at first I had no idea how to get there. And so we had to kind of feel our way. The group, there was about 16 of us, 8 on one side, 8 on the other, give or take 1 or 2. And we met once a month because there are a lot of people and we had to get together, and Buzz and his group did a good job of making sure we had the meetings and the locations. And at each meeting, for the first 4 meetings, we made some pretty good progress. At first, there was a little bit of pushing back. But after the 3rd or 4th meeting, we started talking together like we cared about each other, like we liked each other, and that we had the same issue, but we had different ways of going at it. At the 4th, 5th meeting, we came to the important issue, and that was the original design, which was kind of the elephant on the table. And Dr. Lozman, in his infinite wisdom and good judgment, pulled that design off the table. And then Dan Dembling and his group and architects began to work on making some designs that really were pretty interesting. But there was one more step. I had a friend from Adirondack Design who I'd worked with a few years before, Michael Blau. And I had worked on a project. And I said, Michael, we got an issue here. We're dealing with trying to come up with a memorial, not a museum, a memorial. And we need some help. We need somebody to come in and kind of talk to us. And so Michael came down, and with his expertise, their company has done a lot of big projects, like they build big things for Disney and they build big things for operas and plays and stuff like that. So he's had a lot of experience building those kinds of things and going through the questions and the answers about what they were, what it was all about, and how to get there. This group of ours, as we worked, got closer and closer, and we really started to consider the important issues that were at hand. And our goal was to finish the discussion, to agree on a picture of a design that we could all support. In January of this year, we had an important meeting after the holiday. And I can remember Michael and one other person saying, hey, we're 80% there. And we all looked around and said, wow. And then the meeting we had in February, we were 95% there. Wow again. We had come to the point of being able to take this design and then take it back to the Jewish Federation and say, here's the design, we support it, we are unanimous in our support about this design, how do you feel about it? Well, that presentation went beautifully, and the Jewish Federation gave it its unanimous support. Now, they're a long way from building it, and they're a long way from all the questions that have to do with building it and raising money. That's not even on the table yet. That's something that has to come later on, and it will. But right now, it's all about the design and the people have done it and what they've done. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Michael Blau. And Michael is the individual, when you consider monuments, when you consider the kind of thing that we were dealing with, how do you deal with this? It's not a museum. This is a memorial. And how do you look at it? So we said, Michael, walk us through this thing so we understand it.
Thank you, Neil. I'm Michael Blau. I am a principal at Adirondack Studios. I won't get into Adirondack Studios very much. I really want to talk about the process. And the process that we worked on was many steps of getting people to understand what a memorial is. And so what we did was we set up ranges. Ranges like a memorial can be massive, can be large, or can be intimate, right? So we have a scale, large or small, intimate. We set up we asked the question, is it architectural or is it figural, like a sculpture? Is it a single moment in history, or is it a story that follows through? Is it abstract, or is it something that's realistic? Is it something that is, you can have layered experience, a deep dive? Or is it something that is right in your face? So we use these 5 criteria. And these 5 criteria, we did research. Everyone did homework in the group. We worked together. We talked about all of those things, important monuments around the world. Not talking about Holocaust monuments at all, but only important monuments. What is the education behind those? What is the messaging behind those? And we all got to a scale. We all, on each of those lines, got to consensus as to what belonged here in Niskayuna. Not something like the Iwo Jima, right? Which is, there's of the flag and so on. It isn't something to that scale. It isn't like the Washington Monument. It isn't like the FDR Memorial or Martin Luther King. But we got a range. And as we worked together, we were able to hone in and get closer and closer as to what's important. And so what's important is what we learned and what I learned through the process, because I learned a tremendous amount. One thing that I learned is that as a group, everyone who participated, they wanted a message. And the message was for someone to experience something to change their behavior for the good, for better. So that's really important. I learned that. I learned that it's forward looking. It's about history, but it's about looking to the future. So it's using the history as an example, the experience, but it's about looking to the future. And that's important to understand as well as you consider looking at this design. It's about making things better in the future. It's about reverence and respect. That's very important. And we learned where that needed to be. We learned about sensitivity and how to be sensitive and how to give information, to educate in a way where someone can step back and get a feeling, or they can do a deep dive and learn more. And through the process of developing the memorial, we came up with the story, the path, the messaging, and so on. So that's important to be sensitive about that. Very important was a place of peace, a place where someone can sit with their family or a loved one or a friend and have peace, whatever that is, a moment of reflection or many moments of reflection. That's very important too. It isn't about chaos. It isn't about moving people around. It's about a place of peace. And that we got through our scales as well. So that's very important, that park-like setting, all of those things. So we worked very diligently. The word that I used previously was rigor. We did homework, we studied, we analyzed, we learned a lot of rules in the process of how to develop a memorial that meets all the criteria. And so I'm very proud to have been invited into such an illustrious group, really dedicated people who want to do the right thing through the whole process and let people learn from an experience in going to a place like this. And I'm very proud to be part of that. And I'm very proud to introduce Dan Demling, who will show you the design, and you'll be able to see the work that we've come up with and so on. So thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having us. This is nice. I get a second stab at this last week, this week, and I'm going to make the most of it. So this is the site. This is a view I didn't show last week, and I wanted to point out a couple of things because I saw the news presented certain things last week. This is the site right over here. This little spot right here. Relative to the cemetery, and the entrance to the cemetery is right up here. And it's important because some people have been misunderstanding that this is the site, and it's not. The site is along Route 7. It's the easternmost portion of the cemetery. This will not be part of the cemetery. The Catholic Church is donating 2.08 acres. It is going to be completely separately deeded. It's not within it, it's at the very eastern edge along, and it is along Route 7. You can see the site right there. We'll have 27 parking spots. It's an entrance right off of Route 7. I'm not going to get into the traffic studies. There's a lot of information having to do with that, but I do want to show a little bit more about the site here and sight lines. The plan is to leave at a minimum 40 feet of untouched woods in the front of it. That's 40 feet. Plus, at the rear of that 40 feet, we'll be adding a row of evergreens. Behind that, we're adding another clumping of shade trees. It's approximately 90 feet back from the property line to the first element. And as we get into what those elements are, to any elements that are higher than, I'd say, 4 or 5 feet, it's approximately 100 feet back. I visited the site several times. One of the times I wanted to get an understanding of what an object would be at 20 feet tall, and if you could see it from the road. I went out to the site. I think it was in March that I did this. If I can, hang on. If you can look back here, this is that 20-foot marker right there. And that's approximately 80 feet back. As you can see, this is March when there's no leaves on the trees. That's what you would see, if you could even see anything. The size of the monument is approximately, from end to end, it's about 96 feet total. And I'll show you what those elements are. But to give you a sense of the scale, this is I overlaid it on top of the rotary on Fuller Road, where you exit I-90, to give you the sense of the size of this. It's very compact, very small. So I'll get into the elements. As you can see, it's a star, the Star of David, 6-pointed star as you look down on it. And you enter onto the site from the east portion. You go around a cul-de-sac, and the parking is in the rear, and you enter it from down. And by the way, the slope of the site from the entrance to the site, as you go to the back of the site, rather, it drops about 6 feet. So you would never see the cars from the road. It would be absolutely impossible to see those cars. I'm going to get into the design in and of itself. It's broken into what I'll call 6 parts. There's what we have named. The first part is names. The next part is yellow star or Kristallnacht. Then numbers, final solution, and then bearing witness. And as you exit, it's never again. And I'll get into some of the details on that. This is the driveway into the site. That's the cul-de-sac I talked about. And you see just a little tiny edge piece of the entrance to the memorial. As you go around the cul-de-sac, and what you'll notice here is the scale. And you'll start to see the scale. The highest point, other than the towers, is somewhere around 8 or 9 feet, the surrounding walls. Very human. The material is brick. It's a common material in this area. Brick and concrete and stone. And then a steel entrance area. Now I call this names. It's the arrival chuppah. A chuppah in the Jewish tradition is, we were nomadic people. The temporariness of a 4-pole structure. And that's the arrival point. It also represents names, which is when you first arrive, this is what Jewish life was like in Eastern Europe prior to World War II, prior to the Nazis taking over. And what we're going to have here is, and what I'm going to point out here is, we'll be including several images that are placeholders on these walls right now. You'll notice some of these quotes are very famous quotes, international quotes. And some of these images you've probably seen before. The plan in this area is to incorporate local stories, local people, what life was like for people that ended up here in our area. When we first got started, my big question was, why here? What is the difference here? What makes this memorial special? And one of the things is the fact that it's the capital region, and what connection do we have? And this is going to have opportunity on this entrance area to show what people's lives were like in Eastern Europe before they came here. Some of the common objects and people either standing in front of their homes there, common objects that they had when they at that time. So I'm just going to show you some of these images. You'll notice also a couple of things here I'm going to point out, and we'll get into the details of these a little bit later. One is a train track. The train track isn't in its entirety. It's bits of the train track. And trains were very important as part of the Holocaust. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But you'll see the train track is the beginning of the journey here. And in some ways, this arrival chuppah also is like a train depot. That's where the journey begins and where the story begins. I'll also point out at the corners or at each point of the star, this is one of the buttressed corners of the star, the corner stars. And what you'll see underneath there on purpose are indication of little stones. And these little stones, and I'll get into that detail a little bit later. I'm doing a lot of foreshadowing for a reason, I apologize. But those stones are set in cement in the paving. So you can't pick them up out of there. They're stuck there, but it's important. And you'll also notice as we go around, these points are separate from the walls themselves, and there are spaces there. You can't walk through there, but you'll notice that those stones travel into the middle of the spaces. So as we round the corner, we're going to get to what was Kristallnacht, representational of Kristallnacht. Now the story. We broke the story down as an organization, as we did as a group. What are the important parts that we can use as milestones that were part of the Holocaust to tell the story? That wouldn't be so overpowering as if this is a museum, because it's not a museum, it's a memorial. So we wanted to pick and choose only enough information to convey the idea here. And what you'll notice here with Kristallnacht was the night of broken glass. That was a definitive point in time when the Germans decided, well, they didn't decide, they had already decided, but they implemented the burning of synagogues, the pillaging of villages, the disownment of Jewish businesses. Jews were no longer allowed to own businesses. It was the stripping away of rights and lives. And what this represents here, we won't really have broken glass. We'll have things that look like broken glass, but also burned out storefront. And we'll show some images and some quotes, but these can be local quotes, such as, "I remember when they came to town and they destroyed our synagogue." Something as simple as that. But these will be quotes that we will get from local people who either lived through it or their grandparents told them about it. There's all sorts of quotes that we can get from here in our own community. Park-like setting. So there are opportunities here to actually sit here and contemplate, to experience this. An opportunity was, this is a little overwhelming. I need to sit back for a moment and take this in. So it's very much an opportunity here for contemplation. You also start to see that inner core, what's going on in the center. Again, I'll describe that as we get there. but that transparency between the in and the out. Now we get to numbers. What really is about the numbers is where Jews lost their names. You've probably heard about the tattooing of arms. We were no longer people with names. We were people with just by a number. There's also the industrialization of genocide, which was the first time ever. 6 million Jews were murdered at this time. But this was when they began to, this is representational of when Jews were brought away from wherever they were, and when they were brought to work camps, and they were brought to concentration camps. And so we tried to represent this in a fairly sensitive way, but still get the message across. And that's the reason for the train tracks as well. And you'll also notice the train tracks at each one of these points. There are also places where the train tracks changed direction. There were a lot of instances where people, not every Jew went to a concentration camp. There was rebellion. There were people that escaped. There were points in time, and I'm not going to get into my own family, where decisions were made and people saved themselves. There were people that sensed something was going on. So there's a lot of different points of but decisions that were made. And that's what is really being represented by these train tracks. The final solution. So these aren't real barbed wires, but it's representational. And again, this is an opportunity to show there's a difference between the in and the out. Without being too graphic, it tells a story here about the cruelty to other human beings, to cage them in like animals. Bearing witness. This is very important. One of the main goals that we had wasn't just that we wanted to educate people. What we wanted to do is create witnesses when you visit here, that you will get the full weight of this story. As I said in the last Wednesday, it's a cautionary tale. And what we want to say is never again, but we want to create witnesses, not just people that understand the story, but people that we want to have the opportunity to educate people so that they will see this should never, ever happen again in any form. So as we go inside, I want to point this out. What you'll notice here, again, those little stones, they go in between the wall. You know what? I'm going to go back to the site plan just before we go inside here. I want to point this out. If you'll notice, those stones, I call it the river of stones. They go inside between the walls and they go around the big towers. Now I'm going to talk about those towers for a second. Those towers are 18 feet tall. They're made of concrete, and they will be 18 feet tall. Why 18 feet? In the Jewish tradition, the number 18 is a spiritual number. It's high. It represents life. It's a very important number. And also, by the way, the size of this, 72 feet from point to point. 18 feet from the point at which you enter here, there's a slope down that's 18 centimeters that goes down into a lower, that goes down a little bit. And it's 18 feet from the inside of the hexagons. So there's a lot of, we architects, we try to make, order out of all the chaos, and those are the numbers. It also happens to be a really good scale. And as you can feel the weight of these towers in the footprint are actually the shape of the points of the stars, but they've been truncated and extruded to tilt over at an 18-degree angle towards the visitors on the inside there to get the full weight and the gravity of what 6 million Jews having been murdered. Also, you'll notice there's a plinth in the middle. And some of those very same objects that were in the first photographs when people arrive will have objects that represent those same objects that were in the first photographs in the names will be here, bronzed in the center on a plinth. They're the objects without the people. And what you'll notice are stones. And in the Jewish tradition, we don't put flowers on graves to remember people. We put stones, little pebbles. And if you go to a Jewish cemetery, you'll notice a lot of little stones. It's the memory of the people. The act of taking what becomes loose stones directly under these towers and placing that stone on that plinth, the power of that to create witnesses. We call these shiva stools. In the Jewish tradition, we sit shiva for 7 days after people die. There are 36, again a multiple of 18, shiva stools. Each one of the bases of those stools are in the shape of the point of the stars, of the Jewish star. You'll notice on the inside of this, everything is gray, as opposed to having the color on the outside, to create a solemn environment on the inside of this. Each one of the walls, we have the opportunity to engrave on the walls the name of every country that a Jew was murdered during the Holocaust. We'll also have the name for Jew in that language and the number of Jews that were murdered. Most importantly here, again, we have what we hope will be witnesses going forth from this. And again, the most important message that we want to convey is never again. And in the Jewish tradition, there's a Hebrew saying, it's Lador Vador, which means from generation to generation. And we feel as an obligation, not just for Jews, but for all of us. We need to learn from our previous generations, and we need to set it straight that this should never happen again. And we need to send that message out for all generations. And this gate will be a heavy gate, so there will be a reminder. It's a heavy reminder as you leave this, the importance of this lesson. Thank you.
As you can see, there's been a tremendous amount of thought that's been put into this. The educational committee has a lot of work to do to fill out the educational materials that will be on the walls and all the educational programs that will be had. And so now, sir, I believe you want to take over and.
Thank you. We've asked people to sign up, and I have a list that I will call out as you speak. And I'm also going to name the person that's next in line, and there's a seat up here in the front that we'd ask that person to sit in so that we can move the process timely. We ask you, and we're requesting that you please keep your remarks to 3 minutes and you keep your remarks respectful. With that, I'd like to call our first speaker, Rosalyn Weiss. And the second person is Karen Berry.
Caroline Wierzbowski, sorry.
Carolyn Wierzbowski is the second person. The first person is Rosalyn Weiss.
And Rosalyn was unable to attend tonight due to a medical issue, but I wanted her voice to be heard. So I recorded her, and I'm going to play this. I'll have it as loud as it can go. I appreciate your patience. She really wanted to use her own words.
Hi, good evening. My name is Rosalyn Weiss. I live in Rexford, New York, and it's been the last year. The other 77 of my 81 were spent living in Niskayuna. I wanted to talk to you about a visit of some years back which made a tremendous impression upon my late husband and me. It was a visit to Europe in which we visited, among many places of interest, some museums. But the most outstanding place that we spent time in turned out to be a beach. The beach was Omaha. We sat on a cold stone bench on that cool spring day, looking at the reflecting pool, the rotunda in which an entire map of our forces had been through to get to that point in history. And then we experienced the feeling of an unending field of crosses and stars of David on a rippling field of grass. To the side of that were tanks and armaments, and beside that, the crash of the ocean, in which thousands upon thousands of our guys lost their lives against the Germans on that fateful time at Normandy. We were so impressed that when we came home, we commented on it to our senator, who said, appreciate the fact that the meticulous care that goes into every single one of our cemeteries is paid for by every American taxpayer, not the people in whose countries the lives were lost. And now I'm going to take a fast moment. That same period of time, in early 1944, my then husband-to-be, who was 13 years old, was taken from his home with his two older brothers of 14 and 18 and his 5 younger siblings down to a tot, and his parents, announced by the Gestapo to leave their home, at which point the younger ones were murdered on the spot and the rest of the children and his parents were whisked away, never to be seen again. While this was going on, his neighbors stormed into the house, the neighbors whom he had known all his short life, in order to steal the silverware, the tablecloths, and whatever else they deemed of value. My husband of 13 years of age at that time, whom I'll call Beshert, which means destitute, he and his 14-year-old brother and 18-year-old were taken away, the oldest to Mauthausen, my husband-to-be and his 14-year-old brother in a boxcar of a trip of indeterminate time. There was no way to gauge time, day, night, because it was black. A boxcar that should have fit perhaps 30 was instead filled with people over 200. They were dying, they were dead, they were giving birth. There was one bucket in the corner in order to hold the excrement of these people, which of course couldn't begin to happen. After this nightmare trip, the doors were finally opened and my Beshert landed in Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen with his 14-year-old brother. A nightmare of almost 2 years then passed, and a series of truly miraculous incidents which allowed him to live occurred so that he did survive, and the last part of the war was spent with him and his brother walking from Auschwitz to Munich on a death march. It began with over 300,000 people and landed with only less than 100 at the end.
Thank you, Rosalyn.
Clutching ripped pajamas.
The next person is Carolyn, and Karen Berry is next in line.
Who's first?
Whoever's up.
All right. I'm Karen Berry. I thought you said I was next. I'm sorry. I attended last week's forum, and it appears the Jewish Federation and Dr. Lozman are collaborating to move in a forward direction. Yet I feel it's misleading to publicize that this is a joint venture inclusive of all residents of Niskayuna. Although a noble gesture, the bishop made a unilateral decision to donate the land and has not responded to parishioners' concerns or questions, nor made any public statement. On April 10th, it was stated Dr. Lozman blindsided many. Residents, church members, and those who have family members buried in the cemetery felt similarly blindsided. I understand that knowledge gives us better context to make meaning. However, a memorial does not have the capacity to prevent this from happening because the United States has more Holocaust memorials and museums than Israel, Germany, and Poland combined, yet violence still continues. New York State Senate passed a measure that requires districts to provide age-appropriate instruction about the Holocaust, but hatred is on the rise. Between 1956 and 2016, the Political Instability Task Force estimated a total of 43 genocides took place, resulting in approximately 50 million deaths. To date, the global memorials, museums, and efforts to educate about this atrocity has not eradicated the problem. The plan and location simply lacks the foundation to meet the goal to educate a new generation because education cannot be achieved if it's not accessible to all. So I speak for those who have no voice here tonight, but deserve the opportunity to see and learn from a memorial. Many in Niskuna do not have financial or other constraints that limit their ability to travel to outlying communities, let alone New York City, Washington, D.C., or even Europe. In Niskuna, bus trips to New York City to visit the Holocaust Museum have been orchestrated, while many in neighboring towns can't afford this luxury. Some school districts around the Capital District have financial constraints that do not afford them the opportunity to go on multiple field trips, like our 8th graders who recently went to 2 school trips in 1 week, one to Montreal and the other to Union College to hear a presentation about the Holocaust, and this class will also soon be going to New York City. I believe that exposure to education should not be accessible only to those who can afford it. I continue to advocate for the memorial to be placed in Albany, our capital, because it's more accessible to a greater population and has adequate facilities based on the needs of visitors. Not relocating this to Albany leads to missed opportunity, which gets yearly attendance in the hundreds of thousands. Schools within and around the Capital District will be deterred from coming to Niskuna because teachers are looking for full-day educational experiences where they can go and visit various memorials, monuments, museums, and eateries that are concentrated in one central location.
Carolina. And the next person is Jeremy Berry.
Thank you. The
Carolyn,
legal matter. Oh,
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt? If you can't read everything that you've read, you can certainly submit it to the town and we can make sure that everybody gets your words.
This actually didn't take place last week. I'll have one more paragraph because nobody was cut off last week. And many people went over.
That's true. We timed it last week. They got to speak longer than 3.
Well, we did cut off one, but the one guy that was having like a
Rambling on.
Very long.
yeah.
We're keeping it to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Ready?
Go ahead.
Okay. The legal matter before the town board is not if the Holocaust should be remembered, nor are we here tonight to debate how awful the Holocaust was for people of Jewish faith and heritage. There is no debate. It was an atrocity. Having attended the public hearing, it was clear to me that hardly anyone who spoke was opposed to the idea and reason for a memorial. Only that as originally proposed, it was poor execution on a good idea for a number of reasons, primarily location, educational value, public safety, and respectfulness of design. I applaud the new design and the efforts of the Jewish community that went into it. I am not against your cause. I too have a family history where a gentleman named Stalin took my father to a concentration camp. My father got over that. He moved to Niskuna. He raised a family across the street from where this is going. I also agree with Dr. Lozman and speakers last week that the general level of disrespect for people towards one another and the ugly incidents that are resulting is growing in our society. I don't believe at all that a stone memorial in a cemetery is going to fix that. Someone looking carefully at this process over the last year, the media coverage, the disrespectful comments that have been made on social media towards in person towards the neighbors, as we're called, might go so far as to suggest this memorial is actually contributing to the problem. The reason I'm here tonight is because your proposal seeks to change the neighborhood I live in to a non-residential use and threatens to establish a precedent for other groups, perhaps those not as well-intentioned, to follow suit. The place I live is special to me, and many of you do not know me. You do not know my neighbors. You have not lived on our road. So I'm compelled to clarify some erroneous information circulating about us and our neighborhood. We do not live in Latham. We do not live next to a strip mall. We live in the oldest part of Niskuna in a neighborhood that many of you saw up there just a moment ago, made up of several homes which predate the cemetery's founding. Several of us have lived here since the parcel you are considering developing was also a location of a private family residence on many acres. We watch development in neighboring towns affect our daily commutes, and as decisions and missed opportunities to halt development in the past are coming back to haunt our fellow town residents. We've grown up and raised children in a place where we can go out in the backyard, camp out, and actually see the stars, catch a fish in a creek, plant a garden plot, harvest fruit from our own orchard, and observe wildlife. That is the character of my neighborhood. Finally, several of us have relatives interred at the cemetery. Memorializing the dead does not frighten us, but building a potential tourist attraction across from our homes certainly does. For all of these reasons, I'm opposed to the approval of the special use permit. The new design may result in approval, I understand that. So I'm asking that if it approved, it be done with certain stipulations associated that address our practical concerns effectively beyond just preserving an additional stand of trees.
Thank you. Time's up. The person after Mr. Barry is Marion Jackson. Marion here? And then the next person would be Ron Scharf.
Jeremy, that's who's standing there. Jeremy.
Go ahead, sir.
Since last Wednesday night's forum, I, like many of you, have reflected on the new design and the implications for our community. I thought about the time, energy, and resources that have been expended over the last year on both sides of the discussion. I commend those of you who have become involved and educated on this controversial topic. I believe the residents of Niskuna care about their town and only want what's best. After much reflection, I feel it's important for me to address a few topics. Regarding the initial forum, my plan, and I suspect many others feel this way, was to attend and listen to the new proposal. I assume many residents wanted time to contemplate the new design and did not want to comment without considering the potential impact. I personally felt no questions were asked, as it appeared a new narrative was being pushed by the Schenectady Gazette, and that was a done deal. This was a common theme among the people I talked to over the last week. I must admit, I was beginning to believe it myself. However, I must say that after watching the forum again, I couldn't help thinking about what was said and questioned the true intent of the memorial. On Friday, I received a post on a popular social website about supporting the Holocaust Memorial. In its statements, like almost all original fears of the designs, have been resolved. The Most Holy Redeemer Cemetery itself is a collection of dead people and coffins. And why is a cemetery full of dead people any different from a memorial to dead people? Furthermore, statements about Catholic culpability creates concerns about the real intent, especially since no one disputed this statement at the last forum when it was mentioned several times. After considering all facts, opinions, and discussions over the past year, and after seeing the new proposed changes, I feel the redesign does not change nor satisfy the original question at hand, which is, does this memorial meet the definition of religious education facility under our town code, and does this warrant a proposal warrant a special use permit? I and my fellow residents do not feel it meets the criteria, and here's why. It appears that the proposal primary intent is not to educate the public, but instead to remind the people in Niskuna and the Capital District how the Catholic Church and others were complicit in the atrocities committed against the Jewish people. Why else can a memorial only be located next to the Most Holy Redeemer Cemetery? There are thousands of former residents from Niskuna and the Capital District buried in the Most Holy Redeemer Cemetery that no longer have a voice. The town board has an obligation to now speak for those individuals and their families, those who are no longer with us, but also those who may be afraid to speak up for fear of retribution at work or in the community. Most importantly, we, the residents of Niskuna, must stand up, who fought for and sometimes died in the service of our country. I have one question for you all to ponder. If there was a proposal for the Holocaust Memorial next to Arlington National Cemetery, assuming the same facts as been proposed, would the American people support the proposal? In my opinion, Arlington National Cemetery is hallowed ground. The Most Holy Redeemer Cemetery should receive no less respect.
Thank you. Mr. Scharf, Ron Scharf. Robin Scharf. Ellen Nitchman. And after Ellen is Debbie Reagan.
Hi, and good evening. I'm from 2550 Old Troy Road. Thank you for the redesign of the proposed Holocaust Memorial and for taking into concerns of the consideration that was greatly appreciated. It's not opposed to the Holocaust Memorial at all and do support educational opportunities for everyone. However, feelings are that Troy Schenectady Road is not the most appropriate site in our suburban residential neighborhood. I can't help but wonder if this property wasn't a donation, would this site still be considered? Have other better suited sites been explored that could give a greater exposure and enhance your your vision to a larger population? Route 7 is a constantly busy thoroughfare from Schenectady through Latham and vice versa. Traffic continues to grow and increase with the growth and development of our town, let alone more bus and tourist traffic. This brings up the question of preventive maintenance, plans for the site, including landscape upkeep and keeping the area free from deterioration and maintenance that keeps our beautiful town going. Are there regulations in place for visitor safety? For sanitation purposes, are there lavatory facilities for those in need? Due to unpredicted tourist visitation, is there a process for schools to follow for field trips to limit the amount of traffic per day? Old Troy Road is already a turnaround for traffic, and this would only increase in our residential neighborhood. If traffic exiting the memorial site was limited to a right-hand turn, no doubt those who wanted to turn left going east on Route 7 would screw right across Route 7 onto Old Troy Road. Residents that utilize the sidewalks for biking and walking with the purpose of a curb cut could introduce safety concerns for those pedestrian traffic. Concerns remain on security provisions to prevent open invitation for vandalism and prowlers, not only to the memorial, but to our private properties. This leads to our already busy police department having another area to patrol. Decrease in the possibility of our residential property is disheartening, and thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Messing or Debbie Regan and Paul Messing is next.
My name is Debbie Regan. I've been living in Niskayuna for almost 10 years and have resided in the Capital District for the majority of my life. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors. They were born in Poland, where they led a carefree life until World War II, during which they were sent to various concentration camps, including Auschwitz. I grew up listening to my grandparents retell the Holocaust and the horrors they endured, how my grandfather was taken from the streets while walking, never to see any of his family ever again, how my grandmother would describe the process of selection, how the Nazis would force everyone to face a wall with their hands up. Children would be taken from parents, and she would hear the voices of children crying and witnessing their killing. The Nazis would say left or right, and my grandparents never knew if that order would bring them to the gas chambers or if they would survive another day. They were fighters, both emotionally and physically. I would not be here today if my grandparents did not survive, if they were not a few of the lucky ones. 11 million people perished in the Holocaust, 6 million of them Jews, and over 1 million of them were children. Every number is a human being who suffered and lost their life. In a world where Holocaust denial is rampant, where anti-Semitic acts continue to occur, the risk of the memories of the Holocaust fading into oblivion becomes more and more real. I have 5 very young children. The mere existence of my children has everything to do with my grandparents' survival stories. My grandfather passed away before my children were born. My grandmother passed away when my 2 girls were only 1, and before my 3 boys were born. The youngest Holocaust survivors today are around 74 years old. My children will one day live in a world where no Holocaust survivors remain. We must continue to teach future generations and to not forget. This Holocaust memorial is more important now than ever. We are living in a world in which rising racism and anti-Semitism seems to indicate we've collectively forgotten our history lessons. This memorial will provide a place for people of all backgrounds and religions to remember and learn about atrocities that we cannot allow to occur again. This memorial will be a reminder that we must take action and respond whenever we see hatred, prejudice, and anti-Semitism. I know these are the values I want instilled in my children. My family supports the building of the Holocaust Memorial in Niskayuna, and we hope the community agrees and sees the importance of it for future generations.
Thank you. After Paul is Mishka Luft.
Good evening, and thanks for the presentation. It was very powerful, very moving. My statement is going to be short and a little toned down, I suppose, but I'm the son of Holocaust survivors. I've been a professor at UAlbany for 40 years. My parents and I were grateful to immigrate to this country for the opportunities it offered and security it provided, and we always held it deep in our hearts. Unfortunately, violent hate crimes today have extended to houses of worship, not only in synagogues, but also churches, mosques, temples, and not only in the US, but Canada, Asia, Africa, and even far away New Zealand. So why can't this little town of Niskayuna show a little resistance to hate? There's no cost. There's very little attractive alternatives for the proposed site. The size of a roundabout, there will not be a high-rise building nor any increase in traffic, although it's zoned residential. The U.S. Holocaust Museum, this nation's capital, is not just about Jewish genocide. It's about human rights and rebuilding lives. Isn't that something all of us should be for? George Santayana, a philosopher, poet, and novelist, famously wrote more than a century ago, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. That's why we need memorials." He later also wrote, a child educated only at school is an uneducated child. That's why we need memorials. We Jews are credited with the slogan, "Never forget," but you don't have to be Jewish to appreciate how this proposed monument will echo that sentiment. You can be Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, or any of the other world's religions, or even atheist or agnostic to support Shalom, never again, and Tikkun Olam, repair the world, which means that Jews bear responsibility for the welfare of society at large, and it would serve others well to heed these slogans. It's fitting that the memorial plot is adjacent to the Most Holy Redeemer Cemetery, another sort of memorial. Thank you.
Thank you. Mishka, and the next person is Rich Normandin.
Okay, I'm Mishka Luft, 1332 Wemple Lane in Niskayuna. And I'm a Jew and a child of Holocaust survivors. And I've been against this proposal since the beginning, and I still feel that way. And most people know that, including other clergy that I've spoken with and friends. But I have to say, I love this new design. I think it's a fabulous design. I just don't think it should be here. This location is just wrong, and it's wrong because it does a disservice to the design and to the purpose of this design. And as Rabbi Cutler noted, it's desperately needed that we need that kind of place to go to and some kind of education, but it needs to be larger than the scope of Niskayuna. I want to bring up my points of opposition to it. One is vandalism. It's going to happen. It's going to happen the day after it opens, and it's going to happen continuously. You can't ask for a better target than, unfortunately, God forbid, a synagogue. But there are Jew haters out there, and they're going to attack it. Who's going to clean up and fix it when that happens? And it'll happen a lot. Signage. What's the proposed sign for a memorial at this dangerous intersection? We see the cemetery because it's so big and it's beautiful, but driving past a memorial at 55 miles an hour, folks will either see it and wonder about it, see it and ignore it, or not see it at all. And will those who are genuinely interested in it find an opportunity to visit and learn, or will they find an opportunity to vandalize? A two-pronged problem with the business of the visibility and hiding it behind trees. And I like the idea of this berm, but it doesn't work here. It's going to put added pressure on our police to figure out how to protect it. But it's also going to make it more difficult rather, for people to see out. So that if you're visiting and you're concerned about being attacked while you're there, nobody's going to see you. You can't see who's coming. They can't see you. If now I understand correctly that it's proposed to be closed between December and April. That's going to leave a lot of time for sex, drugs, and rock and roll to happen there, which will happen anyway, but certainly during the winter when it's closed. I'm glad to hear there might be video surveillance. Who's going to be responsible for reporting suspicious behavior? Will people just be able to drop in? And closing it in the winter will keep people out for a good part of the year, and especially the school kids for whom this has been designed. Why are we keeping the school kids away from that period of time? And then again, how do we make it available to the people who are the Gen Xers and the millennials who people are saying they don't know anything about the Holocaust? They need to be there. It's not just for kids. And then there are just people who want to know what happened, what can I come from that and take from it. In my mind, all along, and you as an attorney would know, I label this as an attractive nuisance. Problems are going to happen. People will get into trouble there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is Mr. Normandin here? The next person is Dr. Paul Uppel. And then after Mr. Dr. Uppel, it'll be Rachel Catalano.
Good evening. My name is Paul Uppel. I represent the Sikh community. We have our temple on Union Street in Niskayuna, and we're here to offer our enthusiastic support for this proposed project. We are literally the new kids on the block. Our temple opened in 2012. We happen to be in a very blessed part of Niskayuna. Across the street from our temple on Route 7 is the Dominican Sisters Retreat. And next to that is the Synagogue Agudat Hakim. Within a very short distance from us is the Congregation Gates of Heaven and St. Kateri Roman Catholic Church. We have our Hindu temple just across the Niskayuna town line in Schenectady, and there's a Buddhist temple in Schenectady as well, and Islamic Center is only less than a mile away. So suffice it to say that the world's faiths are all within a mile of where we are, and we love it. We are also proud members of the Schenectady Clergy Against Hate, an interfaith coalition founded about 3 years ago under the inspirational leadership of Rabbi Matthew Cutler of the Congregation Gates of Heaven. We have spent the last 3 years promoting love and understanding and interfaith brotherhood in Niskayuna and in the entire capital region. And that is why this project is very important, because the promotion of love, especially in a politically divided society that we face today, is very important. But in addition to promotion of love, another thing that we have to do is to stamp out and try to curtail the consequences of hateful behavior. And one way to do that is to promote love, but another way and an additional way is to never forget what the consequences of hatred can be. If we are to resolve that it never happens again, we must understand what happened and why it might have happened. Otherwise, the lessons will fall on deaf ears. And that is why this proposal is unique. It is not a commercial proposal. Nobody is proposing to build a giant Cumberland Farms gas station with 20 pumps and propane gas cylinders with 100 cars outside. One only has to look at the Route 7 beyond Vly Road to see what urban blight can be. And we laud the Niskayuna Planning Board that has not succumbed to that commercial pressure. We will be undertaking, or this proposal will be undertaking, a noble project, which is to provide a vehicle for memorializing what happened in Europe in the middle of the 20th century, and to teach kids Rabbi Cutler, a little while ago, alluded to children who will not play with other children because they don't believe in Jesus, or kick the Jew games on the bus.
Thank you.
And so we propose that we recommend approval of this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. After Rachel is Margaret Wexler.
I live at 2166 Eastern Parkway in Niskayuna, and I work at the Schenectady City School District. I will first begin about 15 years ago in Utica when I'd gone to listen to a lecture of a Holocaust researcher share her stories. One particular story she shared that evening will help me explain my position on the proposed Holocaust memorial. This woman recounted a time when she interviewed a survivor who spoke about her favorite yellow birthday dress and how that particular birthday party was the last time her family was happy, all together, and alive. She wrote down the notes of the interview, and after a while, she was suddenly halted with a question. The survivor asked if she wanted to see her family's photo album that was miraculously still intact and had been relocated at the end of the war. As each page was turned, the stories behind each photo were explained. Then the interviewer's attention was again arrested, but this time it was because of a particular photo staring back at her. She sat there and studied the snapshot of this Holocaust survivor as a child, standing next to a table decorated with birthday items in color, but their lives were lived in color. She, like I, up until that point, had become accustomed to seeing photos of that era and images of the Holocaust in only black and white. It's as though the sans chroma photographs lulled us to believe that, on a certain level, everyone during this time lived serious, colorless, and dull lives. This yellow birthday dress reminded the researcher and then her audience that every victim of the Holocaust lived in color. Now, as I've already mentioned, I work for the Schenectady City School District. I teach adult immigrants the English language, and some of them come from nations that, for generations now, have perpetuated the caustic lie that the Holocaust never happened, along with related hate-mongering ideologies. Especially in light of the current national and global events, I see that this memorial will help rehumanize the victims and serve as a physical point of contact to help destroy those horrific lies. Needless to say, it would be an appropriate place for a field trip. In my opinion, this memorial will serve to help restore colors to the lives destroyed because of unrestrained hatred, bigotry, and prejudice, and hopefully educate living generations that the only race is the human race. Thank you.
Thank you. After Margaret is Barbara Norton.
Thank you for the opportunity to share my comments regarding the Holocaust Memorial proposed for a residential site less than 1 mile from the home I have owned and lived in for more than 50 years. Let me be clear. As the widow of a Jewish man whose family members perished in the Holocaust, I wholeheartedly agree with the importance of a memorial to the millions killed, Jews and non-Jews alike. As a society, we must learn about the propaganda, bias, discrimination, and hatred that fueled this genocide in order to prevent it from ever happening again. The latest design of the memorial is a vast improvement over the original. Thank you to all the people who have given their time and talent to the project. It is a true labor of love. Nonetheless, I remain opposed to building the memorial on the proposed site. Countless people who do not live in Niskayuna, or more importantly, do not live on Troy Road, are promoting this project at these meetings and in the media. They want the memorial built in my residential neighborhood, but have never lived in my neighborhood. They have not experienced the uniqueness, the family-friendly atmosphere, the nature that surrounds our homes. They have no right to impose their wants and priorities on me and my neighbors. Instead, I suggest they use their energy to find a non-residential site for this important memorial. The Niskayuna Comprehensive Plan designates Troy Road as residential, from Upper Union Street to Bly Road. Our town officials expressed support that this designation would remain. Any deviation from that plan and support, even for a memorial, puts us on a very slippery slope. More and more non-residential development will follow, and the town will not be able to stop it. I ask that you reject this plan, not because it is unworthy, but because Troy Road is the wrong location. Some suggest that if you are against this project, you harbor discrimination and hatred. That is a play on people's emotions with no basis in fact. The people of Troy Road do not hate the project. The people of Troy Road love their residential neighborhood and want to keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. After Barbara is Sheila DeSaro.
Hi, my name is Barb Norton. I live at 2319 Nelson Drive. However, I'm in the process of moving to Troy Schenectady Road. In fact, I left a wall of boxes in my home to come to the meeting tonight. So might be a little bit disjointed here. I have lived in Niskayuna for almost 30 years. I raised a child here. I've driven by this site, excuse me, probably hundreds, maybe thousands of times. And I love Niskayuna, but I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. When I was in second grade, my mother married a man who we knew to be German. And we found out shortly after the wedding that he was in fact a Nazi. Living with a Nazi as a young girl was every bit as horrific as you could possibly imagine, and I'm sure a lot of you can imagine quite a lot. Having been touched by racism in that way at such a young age was very difficult and very disturbing. I didn't really understand as a young child. His views and his bigotry was so different than what I was taught at Sunday school about, how people should treat each other. And then when I got to high school, I learned about the Holocaust. And it was a very powerful moment for me when I realized what those ideas bring to fruition when they're allowed to continue and they're not, then they're gone and they're left unchecked. So I have relentlessly throughout my life been a strong advocate of education and teaching people about bigotry and hatred and prejudice. And I think not only should we be teaching people in our families, in our schools, and in our churches, but we should be teaching people in our communities. And it's memorials like this that I think are very important to keep that awareness for all of us. This experience that I had as a child shaped my views pretty strongly. And I have a pretty strong opinion about the Holocaust Memorial in my community, where I'm going to be living, where I'm unpacking my boxes right now. And I'm proud that Niskayuna supports this project. I support this project. I think it should be in the most visible location possible. I understand that it's going to be obscured now. That would not have been my choice. I think it should be built on the land donated by the Catholic Church. I think it sends an incredibly powerful message that we should never forget. I think it should be designed, built, and executed in whatever fashion the descendants of this atrocity so choose, and I trust their judgment completely. I'm thankful that there's people in our community who are willing to do this for us, and that would be a joyful experience for me to see such a memorial every day when I drive by.
Thank you. After Sheila is Gay Griffith.
I'm just following up here. Schools with and around the Capital District will be deterred from coming to Niskayuna because teachers are looking for a full-day educational experience where they can go to visit various memorials, monuments, museums, and eateries that are concentrated in one central location. Teachers will often avoid scheduling field trips in the spring that can be impacted by weather, such as in this standalone open-air memorial. After listening to speakers last week, my convictions for relocating the memorial to Albany are no longer based solely on my desire to maximize the educational benefit for greater good. When Dr. Lozman was asked to consider other locations, his response has been, "It has to be here, and you don't understand." At first, I did not understand, but now I do. After the repeated remarks of several last week, it became clear to me that it is not about education when you are willing to disregard the potential to educate so many more for the message of Catholic culpability. I don't see how a town can grant a special use variance when the underlying intent does not promote social recovery, rather crystallizes a sense of revenge. That was Karen Barry's finished statement. Mine is the decision of the Holocaust Memorial ultimately will be made by the planning and town boards to grant a special use permit in an R1 low-density residential district. In the past few years, 2 or 3 special use permits that I can think of have been denied on Troy-Schenectady Road, mostly having the same concern: traffic on the busy Troy-Schenectady Road, getting in and out, and starting a precedent for future requests. So I asked the planning and town boards to think about the precedent you will be setting by approving the request for a special use permit on Troy-Schenectady Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Gay Griffith here? Thank you. And after Gay is David Griffith.
Okay. Good. Yeah, perfect. I have lived at 1932 Village Road for almost 24 years. I am the great-granddaughter and granddaughter of survivors of pogrom in Russia. I am the granddaughter and daughter of Holocaust survivors from Poland. I am also a veteran of the Israel Defense Forces and a 3-time first responder and survivor of terrorist bombs targeting Jews in Jerusalem. I am a naturalized citizen since 2001. Since I last stood before the board, much has happened in the US and around the world. Anti-Semitism in Europe has risen to the levels of the 1930s. Mireille Knoll, a Holocaust survivor, was murdered in March of 2018 in Paris. Just days ago, a 60-year-old Jewish woman was stabbed in Sweden. Recently, there have been attacks on Hasidic Jews in Brooklyn, and just a few days ago, 2 Chabad centers were set ablaze in Boston. Anti-Semitism in the US has risen and continues to rise at an alarming rate. The most horrific US anti-Semitic acts of all were the murder of 12 Jewish Americans and many wounded in 2 separate attacks on synagogues in Pittsburgh and Poway. Their sole crime? Being Jews. There are currently some elected officials in Congress who are perpetuating Jewish stereotypes as well as anti-Semitic tropes and attempting to spread revisionist history regarding the Holocaust. Survivors are dwindling in numbers. My mother, born in 1938, just turned 81. Even second-generation children like me are getting older, and some are already gone. If there was ever a time to build this memorial, it is now. Education is a powerful weapon against hatred, racism, anti-Semitism, and all hate crimes, and the memorial would be an integral component of that education. I understand that there have been some concerns, especially from residents who live near the proposed site. Mr. Demling demonstrated that even if the memorial were 2 feet higher than the current design, it would be virtually invisible from the road. That being said, I have brought several photos from my recent visit to the Miami Holocaust Memorial. This memorial is on the corner of 2 very busy roads. Not unlike Route 7, yet its location didn't seem to pose any traffic issues. It is quite graphic in design. First one. Sorry. It is quite graphic in design, yet it is in plain sight. Yet it is across the street from quite a few residential buildings. While I was there, a group of elementary children was visiting the site. As I watched them, I saw they were very focused on what they were seeing. Many people from diverse backgrounds were visiting when I was there. The proposed Holocaust Memorial is not only for the Jewish community, but for every people of every race, faith, and ethnic background to learn to never forget and to ensure that something like this never happens again to anyone. The Jewish Holocaust Memorial Board of the Capital District has worked very closely with the Jewish Federation, Rabbi Matthew Cutler of Congregation Gates of Heaven, where I am a member and an educator.
Thank you.
All right.
After David is Dennis Brennan.
Hello, my name is David Griffith, and I have lived at 1932 Village Road my entire life. as well as being a graduate of Niskayuna High School. I am the great-grandson and grandson of a Holocaust survivors. I support the building of this memorial because it's important to preserve the memory of what happened, because we cannot forget, we cannot allow hatred that'll cause this horrible tragedy that we are trying to remember to grow unchecked. We cannot allow this memory to fade. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis?
Thank you. I'm a 40-year-plus resident of Niskayuna, and I teach history at Union College. And I agree with the quote that we heard a little earlier about history, but I prefer to teach my students something a little bit different. Unless we understand the history which produced us, that history will determine who we become. We may be determined anyway, but understanding gives us a chance. Understanding gives us a chance. If history serves any purpose, it is understanding. Understanding how the past gives us an opportunity to shape the future. As a historian, I believe this Holocaust Memorial teaches understanding about a very sad historical reality. We humans are capable of terrible inhumanity. There's no lack of examples across eons, cultures, or nations. But at its heart, inhumanity is driven by hate. Hate of the other. Whether that other looks different, acts different, worships a different God, or believes in a different philosophy. And as a consequence, the other becomes something to be feared, something less than fully human, something dispensable and disposable. The basic underpinnings of any Holocaust in our history. Swords, bullets, bombs, poisons, and gases can end lives. But regardless of the method, it is hate that kills. However, this project memorializes something else, something perhaps more important. We are not born to hate. Hate is not a brain defect or a fault in our hearts. Neither is it in our DNA. Hate is learned. We are taught to hate overtly and covertly by culture, society, politics, and sadly at times by distortion and debasement of religious teachings. Hate always destroys, it never builds. Hate takes lives, never gives life. Hate worships dominance, never equity. Hate seeks uniformity, never individuality. Hate thrives on fear, never on compassion. Hate is stone-hardened, indifferent, ruthless, callous, and merciless, never understanding. And as a historian, I remind you once again, it's the understanding that gives us a chance. This Holocaust Memorial should be welcomed, embraced. It is not only about remembrance, it is also about understanding, and without both, we are lost. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Judith Cavelli, and she's unable to be present, and she's asked Laura to read a statement, please.
In the late 1990s, the Troy Road Schenectady Neighborhood Association was established to fight the rezoning of a plot of land on Troy Road. Our purpose was to keep the residential look of the Troy Road neighborhood as it was then and has continued to be over the last 20 years. The latest town plan calls for the zoning to continue to be residential. Those of us who live here have no desire to see the Niskayuna section of Troy-Schenectady Road become a series of strip malls, food franchises, mega gas stations, banks, used car lots, and office buildings as it has in Colony. Our concern at that time, as it is now, is that any rezoning will be the beginning of the end to our neighborhood. We, the residents of Troy-Schenectady Road, have been excluded from the latest round of talks between the planners and the Jewish community, and we have the most at stake. The rest of you can smugly sit back and speak of anti-Semitic sentiment and the need for this memorial, knowing it will never be built in the middle of your neighborhood. The extermination of 6 million Jews and others is a dark period of history for all of us and should never be forgotten or diminished. In the whole of the Capital District, isn't it possible to find a more appropriate and less controversial setting for this memorial? I ask the town board to remember their charge as elected officials, making the town of Niskayuna the best place for all its citizens to live. Respectfully submitted.
The next speaker is Lauren Savage. Is Lauren here? Daniel Furwiger. Daniel here?
Nope, here he comes.
And after Daniel is Mindy Holland.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Fewer. I'm actually new to the area. I'm from Long Island, if you couldn't tell from my accent. But I'm really excited to be part of the Capital Region. I'm the grandson of a Holocaust survivor. And when I saw this online, I was really elated that this community is taking steps to remember this tragedy and to educate the public. As Rabbi was saying, in the last couple of years, since the Holocaust, there's been a lot of hate, prejudice against all people, not just Jews, Catholics, Christians, Muslims, Sikhs. And I think this would be a lost opportunity to educate the public about what happened. While we must never forget about this tragedy, how 6 million people were killed, senselessly. 11 million, I'm sorry. So I think really this would be a missed opportunity in this region. You know, I don't really think there's anything in this region. I might be wrong, but I don't believe there is. You know, I've been to the National Holocaust Museum in DC. I've been to the Holocaust Museum in City, and those are places where you can go and experience truly what happened to these people. And to see it firsthand, I think would be a really opening up moment for a lot of people. A lot of people, I think if you don't have the personal connection to the Holocaust, it's difficult to really understand what happened to families and to people. And I believe that educating people and showing them how these people were brutally and senselessly murdered, like cattle, if you will, would really open their eyes. You know, excuse me if I'm being blunt, but this needs to be heard, and that this type of education needs to happen. Because without this type of education, it's going to continue to happen. And I know people talk about vandalism. That's going to happen anywhere. We build it in Albany, Niskayuna, Schenectady, Saratoga, anywhere you build it, there were going to be people who will ultimately challenge us. So I don't think that should really be a factor we're talking about. Public safety, yes, public safety would be a factor as well, but there's only so much we can do. Security cameras will help. Maybe we can do a community thing where, hey, listen, people who are involved in the community, you want to be part of it, we can help to clean up spray paint or rebuild it. But the fact that, you know, I do understand the residents' opposition to it. I do understand their sentiments. I can understand that. Building this in this lovely area. And this community is a beautiful community. But again, I do believe this is the fact that the Catholic Church donated this land should be a sign, I believe, from God almost, that they're willing to put that forth. And the working together of our two faiths and the Sikhs, even when he was here talking about how they plan and they support for it. You know, the interfaith community, I think, needs to really be cherished. The fact that people are coming together for this. You know, that's it, really. It should happen. This is a moment, I think, that will people look back, either we did it great or we didn't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
After Mindy is Evelyn Loeb.
Hi, I've lived in Niskayuna for 24 years, and I just want to thank the Catholic Church for their very generous gift. It is an opportunity that we should not waste. I'd be proud to live in a town with a memorial as powerful as this one, and I urge the town of Niskayuna to allow the memorial to come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you. After Evelyn is Madison LaValle.
Good evening. I am Evelyn Loeb. I live at 27 Nathaniel Boulevard in Del Mar, New York. I am a Holocaust educator with the Anti-Defamation League Echoes and Reflections Holocaust Education Program. And I train educators throughout the whole Northeast for them to teach Holocaust education. I had the privilege of being a part of the committee throughout the past year that developed this proposed design, which you have heard about tonight. And I felt it was important for me to share some specifics about this design or about the educational aspects. And what I want to share first is that I am also a daughter of 2 Holocaust survivors. And some people have asked about why here, why in this place? Well, I personally have a very strong connection locally to two people who were rescuers during the Holocaust, Yocha and Art Buss, who risked not only their own lives, but their lives of their 4 little children to save my mother and 35 others. And they moved to Woodstock, New York, where they lived for many, many years until their deaths. Art died in 1989 and Yocha died not that many years ago. So there is a strong connection in upstate New York. And if the Buss family had not done what they did, my mother would never have survived the war and I would never have been born. So what I want to share about is a little bit about the Echoes and Connections Holocaust education program, which makes this memorial really unique. And it is a program that was developed in 2005 and we have trained over 60,000 educators across the United States so far. We have already impacted 5 or 6 million students and counting. This program is a partnership with the Anti-Defamation League. It is a partnership with the USC, the University of Southern California Shoah Foundation, where Steven Spielberg had initiated and interviewed Holocaust survivors, liberators, and others over many years. And we're also a partnership with Yad Vashem. And we collaborate with Facing History in Ourselves, as well as with the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. So this is really the premier Holocaust education program around today. And the cornerstone of this program is telling the human story, the personal story, using visual history testimony to help inspire the students to be more empathic, become critical thinkers, and create a desire in them to use the lessons of the Holocaust to want to make today's world better. That is what makes this proposal unique, in that we're honoring the victims, we're retelling the story, but we're also using this to educate. And this program is technological. You can have all kinds of access to ongoing information, and this is something that will have curriculum if accepted.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
After Madison is Roberta Steiner.
Good evening. I just want to say I support the mission of this project and thank you for sharing your stories. They are really powerful and it's really nice to hear your stories. I'm here to talk about my concerns regarding the specific location, not the project in general. I'm going to introduce myself and a little bit about what I do as a perspective to my concerns. I am a local sculptor, I'm a curator, and I'm an educator. I teach sculpture, including public art, at the University of Albany. I have experience serving on committees that organize large-scale community sculpture and site-specific projects, which I do believe this is a site-specific project because it was designed for this particular space. My main concerns and thoughts are the ideas, and again, these are ideas that I deal with any project that kind of is a proposal for a project. Are inclusiveness, accessibility, location, community engagement, and support. As a graduate of Niskayuna High School, I am confident in saying that this is a beautiful but fairly privileged area to live. If the mission behind this project is to educate the public, I'm wondering if it would have a stronger impact in a more diverse community, specifically an area that has access to public transportation. I am concerned with accessibility and who this project will serve. The Catholic Church donating the land is a great positive gesture. However, I'm not sure that the gesture alone is strong enough reason for this project to move forward at this particular location. In my experience, site-specific projects involve the community, neighbors, politicians, educators, artists, architects to work together to come up with a solution. It's my thought that this project sort of feels like it's landed here because of the donation of the land rather than sort of built up from the community that lives around this neighborhood or around this area. I feel like the project would have a stronger community impact in an urban environment with a larger population or an established location with regular visitors, such as our OMI in Ghent, New York, which has an outdoor architecture park and has memorials and monuments there. Also has a larger population of school visits and people that attend that area. So my questions regarding this, or my concerns regarding this project are, what population will this project serve? Is it inclusive to a diverse community that it's housed in? Was the neighborhood and community involved in the decision-making from the ground up, from the very beginning, early phases? Is there a community outreach committee to solve issues of transportation and accessibility? Have other locations been researched in different communities? Because whenever you're planning a project, you always want to have multiple options. I'm an artist and a sculptor, and I do a lot of outdoor public work. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Veronica Shapiro is next after Roberta.
Well, there's a list in the back too, though.
I have 11 on my list left.
But there's also another list.
I'm Roberta Steiner. I guess I have to tell my my background. I've been in Niskayuna for 35 years, I think. So a couple of years ago, I opened the Gazette in the morning to find out that Niskayuna would be home to a Holocaust memorial. That is one reason why I'm opposed to this memorial, even if in its new improved design. It is the process. To my knowledge, the Jewish community in Niskayuna specifically, and the residents of Niskayuna in general, were not involved. No one asked for our opinion. No one asked for our input. No one asked for our ideas. I am also offended by the gift of land by the Catholic Diocese. The same church whose history fostered anti-Semitism, the same church who burnt Jews at the stake during the Inquisition in Spain in 1478, the same church who confined Jews to ghettos beginning in 1555, the same church who blamed Jews of deicide. All this laid the foundation for the Holocaust. This gift of land is saturated with the blood of my ancestors. Will the residents of Niskayuna have to cover the cost of extra police patrols, the cost of cleaning up after vandals have visited the site again and again? What a great place obscured by vegetation for all kinds of illicit activities and wild parties. I feel sorry for the neighbors in this area. A better location would be a site that would not impact negatively on neighbors. A better site would be a place that is already accessible to students and the general public. A place nearer to the capital where people of all ages already visit. As my friend Mishka Luft has said, and I quote her, I think having a memorial to visit and learn the history of the Shoah, and also to teach about the need to prevent repeated mass murders, is a fine idea for the Capital District, but not, in my opinion, hidden away in Niskayuna. Thank you.
Thank you. Veronica. This is Veronica's statement? Yes. Okay. And the next person will be Donna Elia.
We are not able to come to the conversation about Holocaust Memorial sponsored by the town of Niskayuna, but would like our voice to be heard. We have lived in Niskayuna for over 25 years and enjoy living in this community. We are both Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe. Most of my family was killed in the Holocaust. My husband's father, now 96 years old, is a veteran of World War II. It is with a sad heart that we heard there is some opposition to the construction of the Holocaust Memorial in our town. We have always felt accepted and included and want to think that our difficult history is important to our neighbors. While many can go to a cemetery, such as the Holy Redeemer Cemetery, to mourn their loved ones, we cannot. Our loved ones are ashes in the wind. The Holocaust Memorial right here in our town will give Jewish immigrants like us a quiet place to mourn. We also think that collaboration of the Catholic and Jewish communities is building the in building the memorial will make this memorial special. It will teach the next generation that people of different backgrounds and religions can come together and take a stand against bigotry. This collaboration will stand in stark contrast to the hateful divisions the Nazis were able to instill in the hearts of people. What a message this sends, that our differences are not as important as our common humanity. We always felt that Niskayuna was a welcoming and inclusive community. Building this memorial will show everyone that our town is an example of inclusiveness and brotherhood.
Thank you, Donna. And the next speaker is Bob DeSaro.
My name is Donna Elia. I'm a Presbyterian minister, and I've been a resident of Niskayuna for 18 years. And also as part of the interfaith community, I rise to support the Jewish Holocaust Memorial. And I want to express my profound gratitude to you, Dr. Lozman, Mr. Golub, Rabbi Cutler, Mr. Demling, and Mr. Blau, and to the Roman Catholic Diocese for your generous gift. I too am deeply concerned about the rise of anti-Semitism and other instances of hate and violence, and I do believe that we together, regardless of our faith tradition, need to stand and work together to create a better day. I was also touched by Dr. Lozman's point that if one child walks away convinced to work for the healing of the world, that will be enough for me. This is my town. I live here. I care about this town, and I deeply support this work. I will go there. We want to know who's going to go there. I hope people in this room will go there. This will help me support my work of peacemaking, and I believe that's true for a great many people. Thank you.
After Bob is Jack Claraso.
My name is Bob DeSaro. I live on Old Troy Road in Niskayuna. It's directly across from the site of the memorial. It's not across from the cemetery. Actually, none of the houses on Old Troy Road face the cemetery at all. I simply have a couple questions. Dan, you answered the first one for me in straightening out where it's going so we're not confused anymore with the Times Union or Spectrum News. The next one is, as far as I know, speaking to you, the memorial is really only going to be located about 50 feet back from the road with a buffer in front of it. So that's not the rear of the cemetery, is my question. Yes? No? I mean, is it located in the rear of the cemetery?
No, it's on the side,
Okay.
on the east side of the cemetery.
Okay.
Relative to Route 7.
Have all the traffic concerns for this been dealt with the Department of Transportation? Have they done their survey? Has that been completed, do we know?
In order to do a curb cut, there's a process.
Okay, so hasn't been completed.
But we don't go through the process until
After you get
that's
the-
that's the final site plan review question, or one of the conditions.
It's a final site plan review question. One of the conditions of the special use permit recommended by the board was that we would comply with any traffic issues dealing with the planning board brought up or that DOT would brought up. There was a traffic study done. Traffic study found that there was no there would be no increase in traffic, noticeable increase in traffic, and also found that all sight lines were complied with.
Identify yourself, please.
Dan Hubble, I am the attorney for the applicant.
But that was done by a private organization, and when asked if it was still equal for over 50 miles an hour line of sight, they weren't sure. For 45 miles an hour, they said it passed, but for 50, they said it weren't sure.
Again, that's a site plan, final site plan review issue, which we'll take up with the planning board.
Okay, well, I'm only asking these questions because of a letter I read on social media that is completely misleading for this project. But other than that, I've got just basically one question, and that's for the town. Let's say this goes through, the doctor gets the special use permit to have this. 6 months from now, a year from now, another honorable organization comes into our town and wants to build a memorial, exactly the same requirements, everything that the doctor met for the 35 million people killed by Mao. Or the next year, 20 million killed by Stalin in a different neighborhood. My point is, the rub is, how do we stop this when one comes in that is unacceptable? An organization that nobody here agrees with tries to come into our town. If we set precedent with this, I just want to know how we're going to stop that one. I asked Mr. Hess last year, and his answer was he thinks it'd be very hard. So that's all, you know.
Thank you.
Well, the last thing I want to say is, to me, putting $1 million memorial in the woods in a residential area is pretty much the same as putting a farmer's market in a parking lot of another market.
This is a statement from the next speaker, Jack Calabrese.
My name is Jack Calariso. I live at 847 Hereford Way in Niskayuna. Though I am unable to attend this evening's community conversation about the proposed Jewish Holocaust Memorial, I hope you will accept this statement of support for the project. There can be no dispute about the importance of a memorial remembering those who perished during the atrocities of the Holocaust. But why Niskayuna? Why now? I am very proud that the answer to these questions is that certain individuals from our town had the wisdom and leadership to seize upon an opportunity presented by the leadership of my Roman Catholic faith. The site is the result of a collaboration between Jewish and Catholic leaders who are I'm reading too fast, who are donating land from property owned by the Catholic diocese. In a time where hatred and bigotry have become so prevalent that people are becoming numb to it, what an inspiration it is for our faiths to come together in this way with a memorial for the worst act of hatred and bigotry our civilization has ever known. We must never forget. Arguments that the memorial will impact traffic or lead to unwarranted development along the Route 7 corridor are unfounded, belied by current zoning and the traffic study presented by Hirschberg and Hirschberg, which shows virtually no impact on traffic beyond the current occasional impacts like those created by our neighbors at Agudat Akim, Niskayuna Reformed Church, and the Dominican Retreat and Conference Center. The memorial is a permitted use under our code. It is consistent with the uses of other places of worship and memory along Route 7, and is an opportunity for the town of Niskayuna to lead in a positive and impactful way. My home is less than a mile from the site of the proposed memorial. Whatever impact it has on traffic will directly impact me on a daily basis. Without hesitation or reservation, I support the material as and where it is proposed.
The next speaker is Michael Davey, followed by Carl Rosner. Mr. Davey here? Carl Rosner?
I'm sorry, Paul. Actually, I've got,
Rosner?
I have Davey. Okay.
Thank you. I'm a representative of a disappearing group of people, of somebody who was Jewish, born in Germany, lived through the Hitler era, and also was liberated from a concentration Buchenwald by American troops. And I want to thank all of the supporters of this memorial for the idea and the details and the thoughtfulness that was put into this design, because what makes people remember are individuals and individual lives and individual performance and individual activities. And I'm sadly a witness to the individual hatred that occurred by so many Germans in Germany while I was there and went to school and was trapped by the Hitler regime and the Nazis. Yet what bothers me the most is the 1.5 million babies and children that were killed as part of the 6 million. And I always think of all my school friends, all my friends that were lost. I was lucky with my brother in surviving both Germany and the camp. My parents' business was taken away. My parents left Germany to try to get us out too. And 3 children of us were raised in an orphanage until we were taken to Buchenwald concentration camp. Fortunately, we survived. And not a day goes by where I don't think about my friends and the individuals that are represented by the 6 million. This memorial will allow us to really focus on individuals and memories. And I think Niskayuna should be proud that it will be a state symbol of the brutality and atrocities that people are capable of, and that a small town like Niskayuna can recognize the badness of some people and hopefully avoid it and help educate children to do that. I speak to students, I get asked to talk to students of 10 to 12 grade classes, and I'm almost amazed by the interest they're expressing and the understanding that this can never happen again. I'm proud of Niskayuna, and I think Niskayuna will be not only on a state stage, national stage, but also on a national stage for having the guts and the ideas of having such an amazing memorial built in our midst. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a statement for the next speaker to read, Michael Davey, and the next person is Paul Wine.
Michael Davey wished to express his concern about how the site will be monitored and protected. He is impressed by the new architectural design presented by the memorial, but wants to ensure that steps are taken to protect this sensitive site and its visitors from harm.
Paul Wine.
While I'm no longer a resident of Niskayuna, I'm a graduate of Niskayuna High School, class of 1968, and I am very proud to be a member of the Niskayuna High School Hall of Fame. In addition, I'm the son of a Holocaust survivor. My father escaped from the Warsaw Ghetto only to be thrown in a boxcar and taken to Siberia, where he was put in a Russian concentration camp. The only other surviving member of my family was my aunt, who worked in one of those Schindler factories and came home one day and saw the Nazis rounding up the children, including her 8-year-old daughter. And that was the last she ever saw of her. My cousin Rita, my grandmother, my aunts and uncles, my cousins were taken by boxcar to Treblinka and Auschwitz, where they died in the gas chambers and were burned in the crematoriums. But the lesson I learned about the Holocaust was not bitterness. The lesson I learned about the Holocaust is that it didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened, the Nazis rose to power because good Germans stood by and did nothing and said nothing. So the lesson to be learned from the Holocaust is we can never accept the unacceptable. We can never tolerate the intolerable. And when we see injustice, we must stand up against it, regardless of the personal price. This is a lesson we must teach our children, especially in a time when we are told that the Nazis had marched to Charlottesville, that some of them were good people. No, they weren't. Nazis are not good people. And we must teach our children now that it is their obligation now to stand up when they see racism and bigotry and hatred. And this will do it. Why Niskayuna? If not Niskayuna, who? If not Niskayuna, this is a community that instilled in me in my high school years and growing up here values of giving back. I have been a proud member of the board of directors of St. Jude Hospital for 26 years because I learned in this town that when you are given, you give back. As John F. Kennedy told us, to those who much is given, much is expected. This community is a wonderful community. It owes an obligation to our children to teach them that they must stand up. They must not tolerate racism and bigotry.
The next person is Christine Shannon, who submitted a statement, followed by Lyle Barlin.
As a social studies teacher in the Capital District and a lifelong Niskayuna resident, I am in support of the proposed Holocaust Memorial. It is imperative that we as a town demonstrate our collective dedication to never forgetting the human rights atrocity that was the Holocaust now more than ever. Niskayuna should be known as the town that stands up for what is right and for never faltering on our convictions. Acclaimed author and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel once said, "We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented." He also said, "The opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference." We know what happened 80 years ago in Europe was wrong. There is no denying or debating that. Why then do we hesitate to take a stand and create a visual reminder of what must never be forgotten or repeated? A concerned teacher.
Lyle Barlin.
I actually have the statement from him.
Lyle submitted a statement.
I address you tonight because I am concerned about the unusual amount of attention and support paid to this issue by recent publications of the Schenectady Gazette and its writers, who speak of renewed interest in the redesign of the Holocaust Memorial. This issue has been a matter of great contention for Niskayuna over the past 18 months. I believe that most residents were hopeful that the problem had been forgotten or laid to rest. Over a year ago, on April 10th, there was a heated, overflowing town meeting on the same issue, which could not be completed because of lengthy, difficult-to-control speeches by Dr. Lozman and his attorney. Dr. Lozman initially proposed this issue in a quiet and surreptitious manner to the Planning Committee in October 2018, which was quickly approved. Subsequent meetings involved the appropriateness of the memorial for a town of our size and its design. Virtually no one would have had a problem with a religious entity such as a church, synagogue, mosque, or cemetery. However, a religious memorial or on inappropriately zoned land, reminding everyone of perhaps the worst, most inhumane episode of the recent past, did not require enshrinement in our town. As far as Jewish leaders referred to by reporter Jeff Wilkin in his articles, I would suggest that most Jews proudly consider themselves independent thinkers, not dependent on leaders, the support of the town council, or even the Jewish Federation of Northeast New York. Many people of the Jewish community individually feel that establishing a possible target for additional anti-Semitism is unwise. We are not timid or afraid, but a potential symbol of remembered pain, suffering, and perhaps animosity is not necessary or sensible. Additionally, it must be understood that the police department is not obligated to patrol such a complex because of its isolation on private property in an off-road location. Continued animosity and remembrance of the Holocaust is not likely to avoid such a dark subsequent event. According to the highly respected Holocaust Museum of Washington, D.C. Recent arousal of anti-Semitism and other religious violence, including Muslim sects and Christianity, may suggest that the reduction of religious profile could be helpful in diminishing such behavior. The idea of exposing young school children to the proposed concept of memorial is also questionable at best. Remembrance will be demonstrated and increased by education, sound judgment, kindness, and the love for each other rather than dark thinking and retribution. Lastly, and hopefully continued controversy will not generate additional antipathy for our lovely town. Antipathy. Good.
The next speaker is Christine Shannon, followed by Lyle Barlin. Okay. Jeremy Cohen.
I have lived in Niskayuna since the fall of 1995, and I am a graduate of Niskayuna High School, class of 2008. My father was just 6 years old when he and his family fled Morocco to Israel in the 1960s because of anti-Semitism. My maternal great-grandparents and grandmother survived the Holocaust. They and my great-great-uncle are the only ones who survived. I support the proposed Holocaust Memorial because it is important that the atrocities that were committed during the Holocaust are never forgotten and never happen again.
The next person is Boris Gislin, followed by Kim Musaw.
I'm Boris Gisin. I live in Niskayuna for over 25 years. Just a Mohawk Trail, I can see town hall from my windows. And I have 3 children who went to Niskayuna High School, all graduated, 2 of them came back, now they live here with the grandchildren in Niskayuna. And I actually talk on behalf of 5 households because my father and my mother-in-law also live here in Niskayuna, and they are all 2 survivors, and they have a lot of relatives lost in the Holocaust. So I have quite a bit of background. You can hear I have an accent. Yes, I came from Soviet Union. In those days, I'm power system engineer, fine job in downtown Schenectady, and still here. So what I came from the country, when every new political leader will come in, we will rewrite history. And I hope we can do better in this country and keep this history. The first lesson I learned when I was a kid growing for 30 years in that country, keep low profile, especially a Jewish boy. And so when I heard these concerns about the cemetery, my first reaction was actually the same. There will be provocation, keep low profile low. Then I realized I'm a US citizen for 20 years now. We live in a different country and we should try to stand, and I'm in full support of this proposal. Dr. Rosalyn just said about if you bring 1 kid here, it will be success. I promise I will bring my 3 kids here with their in-laws and their grandchildren when we will be ready. So you have some of them. Okay. Also, I'm a power system engineer who heard about this not in my backyard stories, and I'm sensitive to this. Actually, yesterday I did my own research. I'm a boring engineer. I drove to that place, I parked my car for half an hour, decided to count cars. After 3 minutes counting, it was useless because there are hundreds of cars passing by. I live here long enough to remember the upgrade on Unions on the Route 7, so the traffic increased a lot. And I understand why these people are suffering. They're suffering from this traffic, and that's of my concern. So one idea as an engineer came in. What if you plant the trees not on the side of where they put the memorial, on the other side to hide from the traffic? They will be double win because they will benefit from this. Sorry. Okay, so it just as, again, one idea, but I'm supporting this proposal, and I believe there will be resolution found, but I will just think about what else can be done to make it happen. I just want to be a constructive part. I'm in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim is followed by Saul Goldstein.
Hi, my name's Kim Musaw, and I'm a member of the Congregation of Gates of Heaven, and I'm also a member of the Niskayuna School District's Diversity Committee. I want to say that it would be an honor to have this memorial in Niskayuna, and it would model the values of diversity and inclusion that the Diversity Committee is trying to embed in the community and our children. I would be so very happy to live in a place that supported such a memorial. Thank you.
After Saul is John Hoffman.
Good evening. I'm delighted that we have an opportunity to speak publicly about this memorial. I think it's an outstanding idea, long overdue, because all of this leads to better opportunities to educate our children, our grandchildren, and the community at large. My being here tonight was kind of prompted by the fact that if you don't speak out now, your words get lost. You can talk about it privately, but to talk about this publicly is very important for all of us, particularly in light of what's happened in our community and around the country. Pittsburgh, you can name so many different times when there have been opportunities perhaps for other things to take place. Education is the key. This is the place to permit that to take place here in our own community. And I'm thrilled that I'm given the chance to say that I support it, and I look forward to it being built.
Thank you. After John is Stephanie Schechter.
Hi, my name is John Hoffman. I live at 2528 Troy Road. My driveway is directly across the street from the alternative entrance if you don't get a curb cut. My major concerns are, I understand you said that you have done a traffic study. Can we see that? When can we see it? Because I am concerned about the traffic on my street, and so are my neighbors. I also have concerns about the lighting. You're talking about having motion sensor lighting. You have a game reserve right off to the right of where this is being built that have deer coming up and out of there every day that will be setting off these lights. Is there any provision to make it so that an animal would not be doing this? It would have to be a person or a car. One of my other concerns, I apologize. Has anyone considered putting this anyplace else? One, the Jewish Community Center. If you were to put it at the JCC, they have plenty of property there to have it assembled. And on top of that, you would have indoor spaces for people to come see movies, videos, and other types of presentations about the Holocaust. Those are my basic questions, and I will submit the other questions that I have to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. After Stephanie, we have 4 more speakers, and after Stephanie is Paula Metzner. She left. After Stephanie, then will be Ashley Baker.
My name is Stephanie Schechter. I've been a resident of Niskayuna for 26 years. I've been a teacher in Niskayuna from 1988 to 2003. And since then, been working with emerging democracies since the fall of the Soviet Union with my husband as my main partner. I was on the Conservation Advisory Council when Dr. Lozman first came and presented the project. That night, I had 2 concerns. One was the security of a location, and the second was riding on school buses going in and out of the driveway, the road, and in the inside traffic area. I have, with Evelyn's husband, many years and hundreds of bus trips of experience with 7th graders and 8th graders to say that it is a concern. And for this gentleman, I would like to say today would have been my father's 95th birthday. And he was part of Patton's army. He landed in Normandy in the winter of '44. And to make a longer story short, he was one of the first of his unit to enter a concentration camp in Czechoslovakia, and it haunted him for the rest of his life. And something like this probably would have helped him. Thank you.
Ashley Baker. And after Ashley is Elaine Rosen.
Hi, my name's Ashley. I'm from Schenectady. And I'm here tonight to offer my support for the memorial. While I grew up Catholic and have no family ties to the Holocaust, I took it upon myself to become highly educated on the subject. I am no means a scholar or an expert, but consider myself more highly educated than many of my generation. My quest for knowledge on the Holocaust was started 19 years ago as a naive 17-year-old while studying German at Schenectady High School. I was offered the chance to travel to Germany my senior year. One day, our tour guide suggested a trip to Dachau concentration camp. For me, this was life-changing. To walk around the grounds and see where they slept, bathed, to be inside an unused gas chamber, and then to stand in front of the oven in the crematorium, still caked with ash, is something that will live with me forever. After high school, I went to study at SUNY Uniana, and as fate would have it, in the history department was a professor whose specialty was modern German history. I took classes such as the rise of the Nazis, the Nazi state, and of course, the history of the Holocaust. With all my knowledge, I take it upon myself to educate and to teach young folks about this whenever the chance I get. While sitting here last week, I thought about my experience at 17, and it made me realize this memorial could do the same for a young person today. It could spark a zest for knowledge and could produce the next historian on the subject, and we are going to need the new scholars to continue to teach and write and to research so this never gets forgotten. The scholars of the past that lived through it and just after it are starting to leave us, and we need new generations to step up and teach. We need a place for peace and education. I urge those opposed to educate yourself and to forget about the stuff like more cars or security and think about the, the connection being made between the Catholic faith and the Jewish faith. And I hope to see that this place of peace will come to be. Thank you.
Elaine Rosen. And after Elaine is Ben Rosen.
Aesthetically, the design is disjointed. I'm sorry to say I feel that way, but design is very important. There's no symmetry. The parts do not work together. It is off-putting. The message is poorly executed and muddled. It needs to be a design representing 6 million lives destroyed. Thank you,
Thank you.
and good luck.
Ben Rosen.
Rabbi Cutler described the problem, the present problem. A new generation of children schooled in the same old anti-Semitic ways. The memorial, the project is needed, but I believe it can be done in a way that reaches children and educates children more effectively than in its present design. It is too abstract